Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. Thanks to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation for sponsoring the New Stack's coverage from KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con in Copenhagen, Denmark. Learn more about the CNCF and its technical projects at cncf.io. Okay, here with Chris Aniszczyk of the CNCF's Chief Operating Officer. Is that the best title for you?
Whatever works. I'll take it.
Whatever works.
I'm here to serve. I'm here to serve.
Here to serve. I like that. And Torin Sandall, software engineer at Styra. How are you?
Great.
So, policy. You geek out on policy, don't you?
I enjoy, we've collected some security projects in CNCF. Policy is an aspect of security, so I'm a fan.
So what is OPA?
I mean, so I'll give a brief description, and then I'll actually let the project maintainer describe his project. So, a general purpose policy engine, so that could be embedded in a variety of places, right? So let's say Kubernetes by default has a very limited kind of way to deal with policy. Like there's a notion of like RBAC, but if you actually want some kind of flexibility, you're going to need something like OPA. And the fact that OPA could be easily embedded in a variety of different environments is very attractive, and that's why we're kind of supporting and cultivating the project within CNCF. But it does, you could definitely probably speak to it a lot better than I can.
I mean, the project's all about decoupling policy decisions from policy enforcement. So it gives you this engine that you can use to offload policy decisions from your application or from your service or at the host level or anywhere across the stack. So that's why we call it general purpose, is because you can actually take it and apply it in your APIs, at the host level, in your provisioning tools, and so on.
For you, where was this problem born from? What were the issues that really came to your thinking about these issues around open policy?
I mean, I think that as a software engineer, like I've worked at the application level, I've worked at the platform level, I've worked on infrastructure, and regardless of whether you know what policy is, you probably actually work with it on a daily basis. And so whether you're worried about how end user data is getting handled or how deployments are orchestrated or whether a config change is going to bring down your cloud, you're actually dealing with policy all the time. And so I've had a bunch of experience with that at different layers of the stack. I've worked in the telecom industry, and policy is a big factor there. And so I've had a bunch of experience with it in the past.
So how is policy affecting the overall projects that we're seeing emerge? There's so many projects out there now, and the complexities are pretty deep for the developers and for building out these environments. What is it? What is the outcome that you're looking for from a CNCF perspective?
So from a CNCF perspective, policy was kind of a missing piece within our wonderful cloud-native landscape. And if you kind of look at it, the approach that the TOC has taken, they want to essentially cultivate what they think are good ideas, good technology ideas, and see the industry kind of pick up on them. So looking back to like Linkerd and the concept of a service mesh, TOC made an early bet that they wanted to promote that this is a great concept, and the industry all of a sudden server meshes are in. People say this is a great thing. It's you have to do it if you're running a ton of services at scale. You need some kind of control plane, and so great, you have all that. A big part of that also involves policy decisions, where services are going to be placed and so on. So this is where OPA, comes in, and you see OPA now, sneakily integrating with, Kubernetes, Istio. I think I see it in Cloud Foundry potentially. So it's slowly making its place into these environments that just need a lightweight, general purpose policy engine, because there really wasn't really good options out there. But
yeah, when it comes to enterprises, they need to be able to control who can do what, across all of these different projects. And we designed OPA from the beginning to be this building block, this reusable kind of library. You can think of it as a library that kind of policy enables other things. And so that's when we talked to CNCF, we thought this is a great fit because there's nothing quite like that right now in there, and it complements these other projects really nicely.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
No, just saying, like, this is a true like pattern that we've had. Like, you look at CNI, right, adopted by Kubernetes, Cloud Foundry, the Mesos community, Docker, and so on. So it's like these technologies eventually get adopted by adjacent kind of communities because it is a good pattern and solution for the space that it addresses, whether it's networking or policy.
I would say that's an initial sign of success for a project.
And good judgment on the TOC, in my opinion.
Yeah,
so
there you go. Yeah. But you said it was a missing element, right? You said like it was missing on the landscape.
You see that wonderful, 300-400 logo landscape. There are different pieces, and policy could be lumped in security for me, right? Like it's part of the security category. And we were missing, a policy engine or a way to kind of declare policy within CNCF, and TOC thought this was a good one to kind of take a bet on. But there's other aspects of security, like Spiffy, for example, focuses on the service identity problem. Like services kind of need to have a unique identity, and so you could do like cool things like mutual TLS and all that stuff. So there's another aspect around auditing, and so that OPA solves a specific need around policy that was sorely needed within CNCF.
Why was it not there before? Is it kind of a maturity of the ecosystem that then starts to speak more about security?
I think that when you look at these different problems, like how end user data gets handled or like how config changes get handled, it's really easy to look at those and look at them as completely different problems, basically, right? That require independent solutions. But I also think that it's possible to look at those problems and see a lot of commonality between them. And so that's what we did with the Open Policy Agent, was we built a general purpose solution to those kinds of problems. I think as software engineers, it's very easy to look at something and be like, okay, this is a specific problem to my component, my part of the system, because at the end of the day, you have to ship something, and that's what you're focused on. But we were able to step back and look at these different problems and see the commonality between them and develop something that could be applied across the stack.
How is policy evolving then with microservices in consideration and just the deeper complexity that we're starting to see with not just like the use of the container technologies and Kubernetes and the architecture behind it, but now you also have lots of new kind of thinking about how you monitor all these different types of environments, right? You're starting to get into a lot deeper complexities. How do you have to architect the policy kind of in consideration of that?
I mean, so one thing that OPA provides that we think is valuable in this environment where you've got all this automation and all this complexity is that it gives you a way of unifying the policy enforcement in those different places, right? It gives you this language and this engine that you can use to enforce policies. And so it kind of unifies the enforcement across all these different components.
Yeah, so like, if you have a container registry and you have some kind of policy set in terms of how you accept images and so on versus like at the service mesh level, OPA could basically unify, policy definition on all the different kind of layers in my opinion. So it's very kind of unique thing.
So who's it for?
I mean, we target different people. Obviously, like when it comes to operations, it's like the admins, right? The cluster admins and the service admins that are actively using OPA on a regular basis. But initially, we talk with a lot of like platform engineering teams that are building out like security platforms inside of their companies, right? So, for example, Netflix is one of the companies that's using OPA right now, and they have an internal security platform that they use to enforce authorization across HTTP APIs, gRPC APIs, Kafka, a bunch of other places, and so. Like the people that have to look, like architects that have to look at more than just one service, that have to look across the stack at different parts of the environment, they see a lot of value in having that unified control, unified layer. Yeah.
So with that in mind, we're looking at these new projects coming on board that are doing all kinds of. What were some of the newest projects we've seen come on board?
We had Spiffy, Vitesse on stage today. We saw Sugu kind of presenting the Vitesse story. So it's, Alexis's presentation, I think, did a good example of kind of where it was like CNCF 2020 or whatever was his whole thing. And so you saw that, for kind of, this year, next year, there's kind of a focus on working on kind of the ancillary layers. Like we've kind of neglected storage a little bit, security, and so on. And then, developer tooling is also a big thing. So, just go to that landscape and you'll see where are there projects that CNCF has and where they're not, and where they're not is probably high candidate areas where you'll see us focus on in the futures. And the TOC likes to kind of take bets on things. The sandbox concept basically allows us to support early stage projects, cultivate them, grow them. I would love to see, as OPA is embedded and used in production more in different environments, we'll move it up to the incubation level and have them featured on stage. Hopefully, maybe in December. We'll see. Who knows how fast these things move.
So Styra, is that the company that's managing OPA?
It's one of the companies that supports development. Yeah.
So tell us about it.
Sure, yeah. So Styra is, it's a SaaS offering. It helps you enforce dynamic least privileged authorization across a bunch of different environments, but particularly the public cloud. So, a lot of the people that we're talking to are trying to move workloads still to the cloud, and a lot of the times these are companies with very strict regulation, and so they need something that allows them to control at a fine-grained who can do what. They can't just give everybody full permissions on everything in AWS, and so they need help controlling that and locking that down to least privilege. So that's what we help them do.
Okay, so when you're thinking about this, when you're thinking about kind of these different environments, it's there's a lot of noise back here. Yeah. This is KubeCon.
This is live. This is live, people. Yeah.
Multiple interviews happening.
Yeah.
How do you start thinking differently about, the semantics of the language, right? The semantics of the policies. So you can serve both maybe a developer who may have some, certain rights to change policy, within certain circumstances versus we don't want this developer anywhere near this other sets of controls.
Yeah, so we see different, there's definitely different people that are involved in creating policy, and they have different, they have different capabilities. And so for some people, it's you need a point and click UI that you can give to them that they can use because they have to do this so often, or they have to do something very repetitive. And so for that, it's okay, great, create the point and click UI and give that to them. There's other people that want to be able to control at a very fine grain, what can happen in their system. And for that, you really need a language that has lets you do all kinds of fine-grained operations and express, at a low level against, the Kubernetes objects, what's allowed to happen and what's not. So we offer it, we enable both, really.
You talked a little bit, there was some talk today about kind of how projects mature through the CNCF.
Yeah, you saw that wonderful Crossing the Chasm classic diagram by Liz. It was great, yeah. I liked it.
Yeah, but there's, and Kubernetes just graduated.
Yeah, our first project to graduate.
Prometheus is going to graduate.
It's in queue, yeah.
Yeah, we have others coming up, coming up through Fluentd, for example, right? You're in the sandbox stage, right?
Yep.
What checklist do you have to mark? Do you have to mark off to really get to the next level?
So, there's a certain amount of production usage that the TOC likes to see for a project. Diversity in maintainership. So generally, we don't like to see one single entity be the only list of maintainers with a project. Defining project governance. So we generally, from a CNCF perspective, we want to see projects have an open, transparently defined, governance that markdown file that basically says, here's how we add more maintainers to the projects. Here's how we add sub-projects. Here's how we potentially do releases. So getting all those things kind of fleshed out, they will have an opportunity to present to the TOC and say, hey, we would like to move up to the next level because, we're being used by, Netflix, AWS, blah, 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 whatever, right? And from there, the TOC will vote and, off they are to the races, to the incubation level.
So where are you guys?
I think over the last year, we've seen, I think we're at 20 plus different companies that are using it pretty actively right now. And that's been growing quite a bit over the last year. So that's super exciting. And I think that as the contributor base grows, as the community grows, being able to leverage the CNCF's expertise around governance is going to be a big win for us. Obviously, part of OPA is a language, and so we don't expect a huge number of people to be contributing to building an evaluation engine, but we do want to bring on other contributors, and we're actively working with other companies right now. So.
Tell us more about the language in itself.
The language itself. So the language itself is based on Datalog, which comes out of the logic programming community.
Yep.
And it's sort of like it's a language with very well-defined semantics. So it's very clear when you look at a Datalog program, you can analyze it and reason about it very unambiguously. And so that's why it's a good fit for policy. So it comes out of like decades of research in that space. And so we sort of modernized it for things like JSON and for the sort of cloud native space. But that's where the language has its roots.
We're starting to see more of these technologies too that are helping kind of create this declarative environment for for policies. Inspect from Chef, is one example of that I think of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as more and more people kind of move to like distributed systems, like the way you manage those is through declarative APIs and through declarative languages. And so like Kubernetes has been at the forefront of bringing declarative languages, or rather declarative APIs to the broader community. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of that for sure going forward.
Well, great guys. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk. It's been good to catch up a little bit about where OPA is now. I mean, it's a lot. These concepts are old but new. They're just coming right back up to the surface.
I mean, policy is not a new concept by any means, but it's super important.
But building languages behind a new policy,
a general policy engine,
policy environment is pretty interesting. Are there, what are the, oh gosh, now I'm going to ask all these questions. What are the roots of policy engines then that you're pulling from? I mean, I probably shouldn't even ask that, but I just,
there are like there's the academic side, which is more like leveraging things like Datalog and logic-based programming.
Yeah.
So we pull like the semantics of the language from that. And then there's obviously, things like XACML and RBAC and stuff have been around for ages, right? And so we look at those and draw inspiration from that.
So what was to you fascinating about those older engines that they were thinking about, those primitive issues that they were considering that now you're considering? There's kind of an academic kind of a perspective there when you're thinking about that kind of comparison to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is being able to pull in context, right, and use context as something that informs your policy, right? So being able to pull in arbitrary data from like AD or a ticketing system or something like that requires that you have like sufficient generality in the program in the policy language. And so that's something that you pull that out of like decades of research in like databases and programming languages.
How did you guys think of this back in the day when you were at Twitter and like you guys were scaling out everything and you were trying to think about policy? Was it all manually done?
It was in-house stuff that we built. There was nothing I think generic that we could pull from. So I mean, any company operating at scale, especially with a bunch of services, is going to need to have some way to handle policy decisions, right? So it was all in-house.
Yeah. Did any of those projects get open sourced? Were there any of like major scale out projects that open sourced their engines?
Not that I'm familiar with. I don't. I'm not a policy guy. I'm an infrastructure person.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the time they're domain specific or project specific. Right? So policy's been around the networking space forever, right? Yep. But it's very domain specific.
So then, what were the challenges in building a lightweight policy? Is a lightweight policy an architectural challenge in itself? Because it is supposed to be lightweight, it's supposed to be taken into consideration that it can kind of fit everywhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we wanted to solve with OPA was the ability to write policy over like these arbitrary kind of data sources that are all kind of exposed as like JSON and YAML today, right? So being able to have very good support for these deeply nested kind of complex data structures that you see coming out of APIs today was one of the main things that we tried to solve early on. Well, great. Well, thanks again, you guys, for taking the time to talk. I wanted to I thought of some of these follow-up questions as I was just asking.
Yeah, no worries.
It always happens.
So, Chris, good to see you, and Torin, good luck with with everything on OPA and the company that you're with, Styra.
Perfect.
Cool. Thanks for taking the time.
Great. Thanks, guys. Thanks to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation for sponsoring the NewStack's coverage from KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con in Copenhagen, Denmark. Learn more about the CNCF and its technical projects at cncf.io. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcasts. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.